Imagine you finally decide it is time to secure your home.
Right, like you've been worried about intruders or
So
something.
exactly, you've been on edge. So you hire this highly recommended, completely renowned security architect to build like an impenetrable fence around your property.
Okay, I'm with you.
And they drop these blueprints, and they look incredible.
Uh,
High concrete walls, motion sensors, laser grids, the absolute works.
Sounds pretty safe.
Right. You look at these plans and you feel this profound sense of relief. You finally feel safe. But then you sit down and look incredibly closely at the fine print of the contract.
Which nobody ever does, right?
Exactly. But you do it this time. You look at the actual technical specifications,
Yeah.
and you realize something terrifying.
Uh-oh.
The architect deliberately designed the laser grid to automatically power down, the heavy iron gates to unlock, and the security cameras to, like, loop old footage every single time a very specific group of local thieves walks up to your front door.
Wow. Which, I mean, is infinitely more dangerous than having no fence at all. Because it weaponizes your own sense of security against you. You think you're safe, so your guard is totally down.
Exactly. Welcome to the deep dive. Because today, we're looking at how a law designed to protect a nation can, mathematically, be coded to become the very mechanism that locks its citizens out of power forever.
It's a heavy topic today.
It really is. For you, the learner listening at home, we are unpacking a highly critical, incredibly intricate editorial published by Rappler.
Right. Dated March 23, 2026.
Yes. The piece is titled Killing Us Softly with the Anti-Dynasty Bill, written by Nico Villarete. But we aren't just reading this piece in a vacuum,
No, we have to look at the whole picture.
Exactly. We are taking the surrounding political and geopolitical news headlines of that exact same day to map out the complete chaotic ecosystem in which this legislation is being birthed. Okay, let's unpack that.
Wait, before we move into the actual mechanics of this legislation, I need to firmly set the ground rules for our discussion today.
Oh, absolutely. Very important.
We must be absolutely clear with you, our listener. The source material we are examining today contains highly politically charged content.
Very charged.
It involves complex dynamics of Philippine politics, left-wing and right-wing critiques, severe allegations of systemic corruption, and actions involving major international administrations.
Yeah, it covers a lot of intense ground.
So I must explicitly state that neither of us here is taking a side. We are not endorsing the viewpoints presented in this Rappler editorial.
Right.
Nor are we making any of our own political judgments about the figures or families mentioned. Our sole, unwavering purpose today is to impartially report on, analyze, and synthesize the arguments, the perspectives, and the facts.
Exactly as they have been presented to us in the provided source material.
Yes, exactly as presented. We are here to act as your analytical guides through the text. Nothing more, nothing less.
Perfectly said. And the narrative hook of this text, the staggering irony we are going to explore with you today, is how a piece of legislation marketed globally and domestically as a monumental democratic reform is being described by critics on the ground as the ultimate killer.
The killer of an equitable society.
Right. And to make it even more surreal, this is all unfolding against the backdrop of the 40th anniversary of the Edite People Power Revolution.
It is a profound institutional paradox. I mean, to understand how a reform bill becomes a weapon, we really have to bypass the political rhetoric.
Cut through the noise, yeah.
Exactly. We have to look directly at the structural mechanics of the legislation itself. The editorial does an excellent job of dissecting what critics are calling a massive boodle.
A scam.
Right, a scam.
Right.
So the core of this new approved anti-dynasty bill lies in a very specific mathematical boundary.
Okay, lay it out for us.
It prohibits relatives from holding office only up to the second degree of consanguinity or affinity.
Okay, so for those of us who don't traffic in genealogical legal jargon on a daily basis, let's translate that into practical terms.
Good idea.
Consanguinity basically means blood relations. Affinity means relations by marriage, right?
Correct.
So first degree is your parents and your children. Second degree extends to your grandparents, your grandchildren, and your siblings.
That's the limit.
Right. So on a press release saying we are banning relatives up to the second degree sounds like a really firm line in the sand.
It sounds great on paper, but the text provides a quote from Anti-Dynasty Network convener Mikey Defensor that just shatters that illusion completely.
What does he say?
Well, Defensor points out the gaping structural loophole this specific boundary creates. He notes, in a sense, across all levels of government, you are still allowed to hold positions simultaneously.
Oh, wow.
He says the governor can still be the father, The mayor can be the mother, the counselor can still be the child.
Let's actually visualize how that dynamic plays out in real time. Because it's not just about titles, it's about the flow of capital and authority.
Absolutely. The money and the power.
Imagine a single province. The father sits as the governor. He controls the macro-level provincial budget, the massive infrastructure grants coming down from the national government, the provincial police deployment.
Which is a huge amount of localized power.
Huge. Meanwhile, his wife is the mayor of the capital city within that exact same province.
Right.
She controls the municipal business permits, the local commercial zoning, and the city-level contracts.
Okay, so they have the macro and the micro locked down.
And then their child is the city councilor. They draft the local ordinances and head the appropriations committee.
Wow.
They are functionally controlling every single layer of the local economy and law enforcement. And at 7:00 p.m., they're all sitting at the same dining room table eating dinner.
Passing the salt in the municipal budget.
Exactly. And under this new, highly praised Anti-Dynasty Bill, that closed loop of power is 100% legal.
Which leads Defensor to conclude his statement with the phrase, "Nagalokahan lang tayo."
Meaning we're just fooling ourselves.
Yes, it is a systemic workaround written directly into the DNA of the law.
But let me play devil's advocate here for a second.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people looking at incremental political reform might push back on the text's premise.
Okay, what's the pushback?
Isn't there an argument to be made that a flawless law is better than having no law at all? Like if I go on a diet and my new diet plan strictly bans eating cake on Tuesdays.
Okay.
Sure, it's a weak rule. It gives me the illusion of discipline while I devour pastries Wednesday through Monday. But theoretically, isn't a tiny restriction like no cake on Tuesday better than zero restrictions at all? At least I'm doing something.
I see where you're going with the diet analogy, I really do. But I actually think it falls short of what the author is arguing here.
Why is that?
Because it fundamentally misrepresents the danger of this legislation. Nico Villaretze's central thesis isn't that this law is just a weak diet. The author argues that passing this sorry excuse for a law is an existential threat because it completely formally legalizes the gluttony.
Oh, I see. How so?
Well, when there is no enabling law, the constitutional mandate against dynasties remains this unfulfilled promise.
It's like a moral high ground.
Exactly, a high ground that reformers can continuously point to and fight for. It's an open issue. But the moment you pass a diluted law, you create a permanent ceiling on reform.
You essentially close the book on it.
Yes. The text explicitly warns that passing this watered-down version means we will be entrenching, even empowering and legitimizing dynasties for generations to come.
Wow.
So to adjust your analogy, it's not just a diet that bans cake on Tuesdays. It's a law where the FDA officially reclassifies cake as a vegetable for the rest of the week.
Oh my God, that is terrifying.
You tell the public the health crisis is solved, while formally, legally blessing the very thing causing the heart disease.
It provides the ultimate legal shield. No one can see you for violating the anti-dynasty provision of the Constitution anymore.
Nope.
Because you can simply point to the new law and say, hey, I am operating fully within the second-degree parameters.
And they would be legally right.
That completely recontextualizes why Caloocan Congressman Edgar Aras used the term boodle during the House debates.
Yeah, that term is really loaded.
It is. A boodle isn't just a simple lie or like a careless mistake. In Philippine vernacular, a boodle is a highly calculated long con.
Right.
It implies a scenario where the victim is charmed, distracted, or manipulated into willingly handing over their wallet, thinking they are getting a great deal.
Precisely. And theoretical loopholes like our father-mother-child scenario, they're easy for politicians to dismiss as unlikely hypotheticals.
Sure, they'd say that rarely happens.
But the author doesn't allow that. To truly prove the boodle, the editorial takes the mathematical parameters of this new bill and applies them to the ultimate real-world stress test.
Which is the current administration.
Exactly. The mapping of the Marcos clan in this text is incredibly detailed, and we really need to walk through it.
Let's do it. And we need to look at it not just as a list of names, but to understand the absolute labyrinth of familial power it represents.
Let's trace the network exactly as the source lays it out. At the national legislative level, you have the president's sister, Amy Marcos, sitting in the Senate.
Okay, so that's the upper house.
Yeah.
Then across the hall in the House of Representatives, you have Sandra Marcos.
The president's son.
Right. And he is serving as a deputy speaker and the House Majority Leader.
Which is an immense amount of power over legislation. You also have Martin Romualdez, a cousin, and the former House Speaker alongside his wife, Yetta Romualdez.
Who is a party list representative. So that's the national grip right there.
That's just the national level, yeah.
But then the text takes us down to the local executive and legislative levels. You have Matthew Manitowoc,
A nephew.
right, serving as governor,
Then you have Cecilia Araneta Marcos, a cousin, as vice governor.
Michael Marcos Keon, another cousin, serving as mayor.
And Angelo Marcos Barba, yet another cousin, sitting as a congressman.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Under the brand new, officially approved Anti-Dynasty Bill, this staggering, multi-generational, vertically and horizontally integrated monopoly of political power.
Is entirely untouched.
Entirely untouched. It slips right through the second-degree net.
That is the author's primary piece of evidence. The legislation is engineered so precisely that a dynasty of this magnitude remains fully operational.
It's like the fence that lets the specific thieves in.
Exactly. But beyond just surviving the new law, what's fascinating is how the author analyzes the nature of this specific network. The text points out two critical evolutions.
What's the first one?
First, their power is no longer geographically isolated. Historically, we thought of this family's influence as localized in Ilocandia, their northern stronghold.
Like a regional dynasty.
Right. But the map we just read proves they franchised the operation nationwide.
They really have. They have a stranglehold on the top leadership of the House, a crucial vote in the Senate, and deep executive control at the provincial and municipal levels simultaneously.
All at the same time. The second point the text makes is a brilliant counterargument to a very common defense.
Oh. What do the apologists usually say?
Often, apologists for political dynasties will argue, well, they aren't a monolith. They have internal factions. They fight publicly, so it's not really a unified monopoly.
Ah, the old we argue at Thanksgiving defense.
Right. But the editorial completely dismantles that. It argues that internal bickering is functionally irrelevant because, ultimately, sandugo pa rin sila.
Meaning they're bound by blood.
Exactly. Bound by blood.
Right, the internal squabbles might dictate which cousin gets the better committee assignment or which sibling gets the larger headline on a given Tuesday.
Right.
But the structural monopoly of the institution remains totally unbroken. The casino might change its floor manager, but the family still owns the casino.
That's a great way to put it.
But this raises a massive logistical question for me. If Congressman Rice is screaming boodle on the House floor,
Which he is.
and journalists are writing blistering editorials mapping out exactly how this law protects the ruling family, how on earth does an administration successfully push this through?
It seems impossible.
Yeah. You can't sneak a legislative loophole this massive past a vigilant public.
You can't. Which is why the author argues that the public in 2026 isn't just distracted. They are in a state of sheer, overwhelming survival mode.
Ah, survival mode.
Yeah. To understand how this bill passes, we have to look at the broader backdrop detailed in the source material. The administration is accused of nonchalog sa pansitan.
Sleeping on the job.
Right, or being caught completely negligent amidst compounding catastrophic crises.
Let's really dive into the anatomy of these crises, because the surrounding headlines from that day paint a picture of a nation teetering on the edge.
They really do. It's bleak.
Domestically, the text highlights unresolved food insecurity and runaway inflation. The author notes a profound psychological defeat among the populace,
They state, wala nang umaasang maayos pa yun.
meaning no one hopes it will ever be fixed anymore. That is a terrifying baseline for a society.
It is, and that baseline of domestic economic despair is suddenly hit by a massive geopolitical shockwave.
A war.
Yes. The source material references a war in Iran, noting that the international blame is currently being placed on U.S. President Donald Trump.
Now, we have to look at the mechanism of how a war in the Middle East crashes into the daily life of a Filipino citizen.
And how it creates the perfect smokescreen for a legislative boodle.
Right. It's the macroeconomic domino effect.
Yeah.
The Philippines is highly dependent on imported fuel.
Very dependent.
When a conflict ignites in a major oil-producing region, global freight costs skyrocket and the risk premiums on crude oil spike instantly.
And the headlines provided in our source material show exactly how dire this has become.
How bad is it?
The energy emergency is so severe that the Philippines has been forced to shift its hosting of the ASEAN summit entirely online.
Wait, a major international summit moved online.
Yeah, running a bare-bones operation because they literally cannot guarantee the energy infrastructure to support an international diplomatic event.
That is embarrassing on a global scale.
But the statistic that is truly alarming in the text is the timeline of the supply.
Tell me.
The country is reported to have enough crude oil supply only until June 30.
Oh my gosh.
And it gets infinitely worse. The headlines note the arrival of a new shipment of 142,000 barrels of diesel.
Okay, that sounds like a big number to a layman.
It does, but the text explicitly states that this amount is good for less than a single day of the country's needs.
Wait, really? Less than 1 day?
Not even 24 hours. We really need to unpack the gravity of a 24-hour energy leash.
Less than 1 day of diesel doesn't just mean people can't drive their cars to work. It means the entire logistics network is paralyzed.
Everything stops.
The trucks required to move the already impossibly expensive food from the agricultural provinces to the urban centers cannot operate.
The grocery store shelves go empty.
The backup generators for hospitals and data centers are threatened. When a society is measuring its fundamental stability in hours rather than months, public bandwidth for analyzing the second-degree consanguinity clause of a parliamentary bill drops to absolute zero.
You are so busy trying to figure out if there will be rice on the table tomorrow or fuel in the delivery truck this afternoon that you simply cannot care about what the House Majority Leader is drafting.
You literally don't have the luxury to care.
Exactly. But it's not just external economic pressures. The text points out that this chaos is compounded by massive internal corruption scandals.
Right. The text talks about these politicontractors.
Yes, the editorial introduces the concept of the politicontractor, politicians who blur the lines of public service and private profit by effectively acting as contractors for government projects.
Let's walk through how that mechanism actually works based on the allegations in the text. The source mentions lawmakers alleging they have seen messages proving the president had direct knowledge of flood control kickbacks.
That's a huge allegation.
Think about how a flood control kickback functions. The national government allocates billions of pesos to build dikes or dredging projects in a province.
Perhaps a province governed by a nephew or a cousin.
Exactly. The local government then awards the construction contracts. A politicontractor ensures those contracts go to shell companies they secretly own, or to friendly corporations that return a massive percentage of the project budget as a cash kickback.
The result is that substandard materials are used, the floods continue to devastate the working class, and the capital is siphoned upward.
And the very institution designed to stop this, the President's Independent Commission for Infrastructure. What happened to that?
It is described by the author as a massive dud that vanished into thin air. Naglaho ng parang bula.
Wow, it was a ghost commission. So if we look at this entire environment, inflation, food scarcity, an oil crisis driven by an Iran war, and flood control corruption, it acts exactly like a malicious background update on a computer operating system.
I like that analogy. Break that down for us.
Okay, imagine your computer screen is suddenly flooded with terrifying pop-up viruses.
Like red flashing warnings?
Exactly. One says, your food costs have doubled. Another flashes, you have less than 24 hours of diesel left. And another screams, the infrastructure budget is gone.
Right. Complete panic mode.
You are frantically clicking, trying to close these pop-ups, panicking about the immediate survival of your hard drive. Meanwhile, completely unnoticed in the background, the operating system is quietly downloading an update that fundamentally rewrites the source code of the machine.
Permanently granting admin access to one specific user.
Yes. That background update is the Anti-Dynasty Bill.
It's a perfect encapsulation of systemic distraction, but the author, Nico Villareta, goes a layer deeper.
There's more.
Yeah. It's not just that the public is distracted. It's that they have adopted a very specific, deeply ingrained psychological defense mechanism to cope with the chaos.
What kind of defense mechanism?
The text critiques the public for repeatedly excusing the administration's failures with a very specific phrase.
Di balena. He's a nice guy naman. Never mind, he's a nice guy anyway.
Right. And then the text hits us with an even darker public rationalization. At least Hindi killer.
At least he's not a killer.
Wow. The editorial explicitly frames this as a direct reference to the previous administration of Rodrigo Duterte,
who was noted in the text as facing an ICC International Criminal Court pre-trial in The Hague.
This is perhaps the most profound psychological observation in the entire text. It illustrates a drastically shifted Overton window regarding political leadership.
How so?
Well, the previous administration was characterized by such extreme, overt, and lethal violence that it triggered international war crimes investigations. The societal trauma from that era has resulted in an electorate whose baseline expectation for a president has absolutely plummeted.
They've set the bar at not actively orchestrating extrajudicial killings.
Yes.
And as long as the current leadership manages to clear that subterranean hurdle, as long as they smile and speak politely, the public is willing to forgive the fact that their grocery bills have doubled, their fuel is gone, and their infrastructure budget is being pillaged.
Exactly. The trauma response has equated politeness with competence.
That is so dangerous.
It is. And the editorial warns that this exact psychological shield, this nice guy defense, is allowing a completely different, insidious kind of destruction to occur.
What does the author say?
The author writes, but make no mistake, when he and his allies do move, they leave behind a different kind of twisted killer legacy.
A twisted killer legacy. It is a legacy that quietly assassinates the dream of a government free from conflicts of interest.
It's the bloodless execution of democratic ideals.
Which forces us to ask, how does a modern administration engineer this? How do they maintain the nice guy facade while functionally rewriting the rules to keep their family in power forever?
The source material addresses the strategic evolution directly. It moves us from the brutal tactics of the past to the sophisticated public relations of 2026.
The editorial makes a sharp historical contrast, right?
Yeah.
Between the martial law era of Ferdinand Marcos Sr. and the current administration.
Yes, which the text dubs Marcos 2.0. The author notes, let's give it to Marcos 2.0. Marami silang natutunan sa Cambridge Analytica at sa mga pagkakamali ng martial law ni Marcos Sr.
Meaning they learned from Cambridge Analytica and from the mistakes of martial law. Let's explore that paradigm shift. What is the fundamental difference in the technology of political control between those two eras based on the text?
The fundamental difference is the shift from repression to persuasion. The text implies that the current administration realized naked repression won't work.
Right. During martial law, control was maintained through overt physical force.
Military presence in the streets, the closure of independent media, the jailing of opposition figures.
But brute force is ultimately inefficient. It creates friction.
It breeds martyrs, sparks international condemnation, and requires immense capital to maintain.
It gives the public a very clear, very visible villain to unite against.
Exactly. So Marcos 2.0 pivoted. The reference to Cambridge Analytica represents the transition to data-driven psychological manipulation.
It is the micro-targeting of public sentiment.
Yes. The strategy, as described by the author, is "Huwag sisigawan, himasi-masin na lang."
Don't yell at them, just soothe them, stroke them.
It is the complete weaponization of comfort. Instead of using the military to force compliance through fear, they use highly calibrated public relations to buy compliance through appeasement.
The text points out that money talks in this new dynamic.
And the text provides a flawless example of this himasin strategy in action.
Oh, what's the example?
It references the president's State of the Nation address, the SONA. During that highly publicized speech, the president directly addressed corrupt officials and smugglers.
Delivering the line, "Mahiya naman kayo."
Have some shame.
And the editorial notes that this specific soundbite enjoyed great press. It was clipped, shared, and praised.
It sounded like strong, moral, decisive leadership. The nice guy was finally getting tough.
But the author immediately undercuts that PR victory by stating, "Et yun na pala yun."
And that was it.
It was purely performative. The good press from the speech served as a rhetorical blanket, completely masking the reality that the politicontractors remained thoroughly protected, the flood control kickbacks continued, and the infrastructure commission vanished.
The soothing words neutralized the public's anger without requiring the administration to actually dismantle the corruption.
I really want you, the listener, to pause and consider the implications of that mechanism. Is a government that manipulates you with a carefully focused grouped smile actually more dangerous than one that controls you with an iron fist?
It's a terrifying thought.
Because when someone is screaming at you and holding a weapon, your defenses are automatically up. You know where you stand. You know they are the adversary.
Right.
But what happens to the structural integrity of a nation when the concept of good press can entirely camouflage systemic rot?
If we apply this psychological Cambridge Analytica-style approach to the Anti-Dynasty Bill, the administration's overarching strategy becomes crystal clear.
How does it play out there?
By passing a diluted bill, they achieve the ultimate public relations victory. They can stand before the nation and the international community and declare, "We did it."
We succeeded where every administration for the last 4 decades failed.
Exactly. We passed the anti-dynasty law. That is the soothing stroke. That is the peak optimization of the nice guy narrative.
But functionally, mathematically, by restricting the ban only to the second degree, they suffer zero actual consequences.
None. The father is still the governor, the mother is still the mayor, the son is still the counselor.
They get 100% of the historical credit for the reform, while keeping 100% of their power entirely intact.
It is a masterclass in the engineering of a legislative outcome. You pacify the reformers, you satiate the international observers, and you permanently protect the dynasty, all in one stroke of the pen.
It is brilliant, and according to the editorial, it is utterly devastating to the fabric of the country. What amplifies the tragedy of this maneuver is the historical context in which it is happening.
The timing is incredible.
Yeah, this isn't just occurring in a vacuum. The author anchors this entire critique to a deeply ironic, incredibly heavy historical milestone.
The editorial draws our attention to a glaring juxtaposition. The author writes, "Napaka-ironic na ginugunitan natin ng EDSA at 40 sa taong ito."
It is highly ironic that we're commemorating the 40th anniversary of the EDSA People Power Revolution this year. Let's look at the institutional decay here.
Okay.
The EDSA revolution of 1986 birthed the 1987 Constitution, and the framers of that Constitution specifically embedded an anti-dynasty provision into the bedrock of the document.
Right. It was a direct, visceral response to the monopolization of power that had just occurred.
The entire point of the provision was to ensure that the levers of government would never again be hoarded by a single bloodline.
But the Constitution required Congress to pass an enabling law to actually define and enforce that provision. For nearly 40 years, Congress, which is heavily populated by dynastic families, simply refused to pass it.
They just ignored it.
And now, in 2026, on the 40th anniversary of the revolution that demanded that safeguard, Congress is finally passing the law.
But they are using the very mechanism of the Constitution to legally dismantle its intent.
They are taking the safeguard born from a revolution and quietly disabling the lock, all while leaving the casing intact so it looks like it still works.
So naturally, as a citizen watching this unfold in the House of Representatives, you look for a lifeline.
You look to the upper chamber.
Yes, the Senate. It is designed to be the chamber of broader national perspective, the final check and balance against the populism or the localized monopolies of the House.
Right.
Does the author see any hope for the Senate to step in, recognize the boot-all, and remove the two-degree loophole?
The author addresses the potential of the Senate with absolute crushing cynicism.
What do they say?
The text asks, "Maasahan ba tayo sa Senado sa bersyon nito?" Can we expect anything from the Senate's version? And the author answers by pointing to a devastating demographic reality regarding the makeup of that institution.
What's the demographic?
The text explicitly notes that the Senate currently houses 4 pairs of siblings.
Let that sink in for a second. 4 pairs of siblings sitting in a 24-seat chamber.
That means a full third of the entire Philippine Senate consists of sibling pairs.
Therefore, the author's final advice regarding the Senate acting as the savior of equitable governance is incredibly blunt.
Let's not hold our breath.
So what does this all mean for you, the learner trying to make sense of 2026? When we look at the sheer density of the conflicts of interest from a Marcos family map that spans the executive and legislative branches both locally and nationally,
Down to a Senate that is literally heavily populated by siblings.
it means the democratic system has hit an institutional dead end. The mechanisms that were explicitly designed to provide checks and balances are currently populated, operated, and controlled by the exact families who benefit the absolute most from a complete lack of checks and balances.
You cannot rely on a system to regulate itself when the regulators are the primary beneficiaries of the deregulation. And this concentration of power isn't just an abstract political science problem. It bleeds directly into the material reality of the working class. It dictates how the government responds to the crises we mapped out earlier.
Exactly. Look at the other headline provided in our source material. Amidst a crippling oil shortage, where the country is surviving on less than a day's worth of diesel, and the ASEAN summit is forced online.
Marcos signs a new fuel tax law.
And how is that law described in the thought leader piece? It is labeled a gift to the wealthy.
When power is hyper-concentrated within a few dynastic bloodlines, the legislation they produce will invariably, almost subconsciously, serve to protect and enrich the specific strata of society they occupy.
Absolutely. The passage of a fuel tax that benefits the wealthy during a historic energy crisis is the ultimate symptom of the disease diagnosed in the main editorial.
It ties directly back to Nico Villaretzi's opening assertion. This political structure kills the dream of an equitable society.
An equitable society fundamentally requires diverse representation.
It requires a legislature where the brutal pain of the working class, the panic over inflation, and the dread of fuel costs is genuinely felt and acted upon by the lawmakers.
But a legislature comprised of siblings, cousins, and spouses is an insulated, impermeable echo chamber. They don't feel the heat of the fire, so they feel no urgency to put it out.
They just keep smiling, they keep giving well-received speeches, and they mathematically ensure that the legal framework of the country guarantees their families stay in power in perpetuity.
And that comprehensive systemic insulation from accountability is the true, twisted, killer legacy that the editorial is desperately warning the public about.
Wow. What an incredibly heavy, intricate, and absolutely vital ecosystem of information to unpack. We've covered a massive amount of ground today.
We really have. We started by looking under the hood of a legislative boot-all, understanding the exact mechanical loophole of the 2-degree limit, and how it functionally legalizes a father-mother-child governance monopoly.
We mapped the sprawling nationwide supply chain of the Marcos clan's power, proving that their influence is deeply integrated across the country and bound by blood, rendering internal squabbles irrelevant.
We then widened the lens to examine the compounding crises of 2026, the food insecurity, the macroeconomic shockwaves of the Iran war, the terrifying 24-hour diesel supply, and the vanishing infrastructure commissions.
Understanding how this sheer volume of chaos creates the perfect smokescreen for a legislative maneuver.
We explored the deeply ingrained trauma response of the electorate, who accept a nice guy facade in lieu of competent governance.
And finally, we track the sophisticated evolution of political control, moving from the overt repression of martial law to the Cambridge Analytica-style, data-driven PR manipulation of the modern era.
All of this culminating in the tragic irony of a constitutional safeguard being mathematically subverted by an echo chamber Senate on the 40th anniversary of the revolution that birthed it.
As we conclude this deep dive, it is my responsibility to issue one final reminder.
Go.
All of the opinions, the intense critiques of the administration, the mechanisms of alleged corruption, and the political judgments we've discussed in exhaustive detail today originate strictly and entirely from the provided Rappler editorial and its surrounding headlines.
Right.
Our discussion has been a rigorous exercise in media analysis and systemic synthesis. We have not presented these critiques as absolute political truth, but rather as a thorough examination of the arguments laid out in the text. We are here to eliminate the mechanics of the arguments. We leave the final judgments entirely to you.
And before you go, we want to leave you with a final lingering thought to chew on, something that builds on the fundamental nature of what we've explored today.
Consider this. If a democratic system, utilizing its own formal legal processes, allows its current leaders to mathematically write the exact loopholes required to keep their own families in power indefinitely.
At what point does that system cease to be a democracy and quietly, legally transform into an elected aristocracy?
And if the highest law in the land itself dictates that this transition is perfectly legal, who is left with the authority to argue against it?
When the wolves are the ones writing the building code for the fence, you can't be surprised when the gate swings open in the dark. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredibly complex journey today. Keep reading the fine print, keep asking the hard questions, and keep questioning the architecture of the information around you. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.